The noon sun hammered down on Sierra Verde like a blacksmith's forge, turning the red earth into a furnace that scorched through boot leather. Eliza Hart pressed her palm against the general store's doorframe, steadying herself against the wave of heat that rolled off Main Street. The wood was rough beneath her fingers, worn smooth in patches by countless hands seeking the same support. The store had been her father's pride, Hart's General Goods, painted in fading green letters above the door. Now it belonged to her, or so the papers said. In truth, it belonged more to her stepfather, Mr. Caldwell, who kept the books and made the decisions while she minded the counter and smiled at customers. The bell above the door chimed as she stepped outside, its brass voice cutting through the afternoon stillness. Dust devils danced between the buildings, carrying the scent of horse sweat and distant rain that would never reach them. Sierra Verde was dying of thirst, just like everything else in the Arizona Territory this summer of 1879. "Miss Hart," young Tommy Morrison called from across the street, his voice cracking with excitement. "They're bringing in them Apache sheriffs, got a whole bunch of them." Eliza's stomach tightened. She'd heard the rumors all morning, whispers between customers about the railroad survey team ambushed near Coyote Pass, about sacred Apache land violated, about blood spilled on both sides. The truth, as always in Sierra Verde, was as elusive as water in the desert. She gathered her skirts, the blue calico already dusty despite her best efforts, and walked toward the growing crowd, the letter in her pocket, Mr. Franklin Hale's latest correspondence about their pending engagement crinkled with each step. She'd read it 3 times that morning, each reading making her feel more like merchandise in her own store, priced and tagged for sale. The crowd parted reluctantly, men touching their hat brims in acknowledgement, women nodding with that particular mix of sympathy and satisfaction reserved for young ladies about to be respectably married off. Eliza ignored them all, her green eyes fixed on the procession approaching from the desert. Sheriff Boyd rode at the front, his star glinting despite the coating of dust. Behind him, 5 Apache men walked in loose formation, not chained but surrounded by deputies with rifles held at the ready. They moved with a dignity that made their captivity seem like a temporary inconvenience rather than defeat. And then she saw him. He walked in the center of the group, taller than the others, his bearing that of a man who answered to no one despite the guns trained on his back. His hair, black as a raven's wing, fell past his shoulders, held back by a leather band, unlike his companions, who kept their eyes on the ground. He observed everything: the crowd, the buildings, the fear and hatred in the faces around him. When his gaze found Eliza, she felt it like a physical touch. His eyes were gray as a winter dawn, unexpected in his sun-weathered face. They held no plea for help, no anger at his situation. Instead, she saw something that made her breath catch recognition, not of her personally, but of something kindred, something caged. "That's him," Martha Hendricks whispered beside her. "The one they call the Apache Alpha. Greyhawk. Though that ain't his real name, of course." "Why do they call him that?" Eliza asked, not taking her eyes from his face. "'Cause he leads without seeming to. Other Apache follow him like wolves follow the strongest of the pack." Martha's voice dropped lower. "They say he can track a man across solid rock, can go days without water, can call the eagles down from the sky." Eliza wanted to say that was nonsense, but the words died in her throat. There was something about him that seemed to exist outside the ordinary bounds of Sierra Verde's dusty reality. Sheriff Boyd reined in his horse before the makeshift jail, a reinforced storage building of wood and stone that served when the regular cells overflowed. "These men are being held for questioning regarding the attack on the railroad survey team," he announced to the crowd. "There will be order maintained. Any man who tries to take the law into his own hands will answer to me." A murmur ran through the gathering, neither agreement nor disagreement, just the sound of a town keeping its options open. Eliza knew that sound. She'd heard it before when her father had tried to extend credit to Mexican farmers, when he'd hired a Chinese man to help in the store. It was the sound of people waiting to see which way the wind would blow before showing their true faces. The Apache men were herded into the jail, Greyhawk last, as he passed through the doorway. He turned and looked back at her once more. This time, she thought she saw the ghost of something that might have been a smile or perhaps a challenge. "You shouldn't stare so, Eliza." Caldwell's voice came from behind her, making her jump. Her stepfather had approached silently, a skill he'd perfected over the years. "It's unseemly for a woman engaged to be married." "I'm not engaged yet," she said, the words sharper than she'd intended. "A mere formality. Mr. Hale's letter was quite clear about his intentions. The wedding will cement a valuable alliance between his banking interests and our commercial presence." Caldwell's thin face showed no emotion, as if he were discussing a shipment of dry goods rather than her future. "You should be preparing your response. He expects an answer by week's end." Eliza touched the letter in her pocket. "And if my answer isn't the one he expects, then you would be a very foolish girl." Caldwell's pale eyes narrowed. "Your father left debts. Eliza, the store operates on credit extended by Mr. Hale's bank. Without this marriage, we could lose everything." The crowd was dispersing, people returning to their business with the Apaches safely locked away. But Eliza remained, staring at the jail's heavy door. Through the small barred window, she could hear a low voice singing a mournful melody that reminded her of the Irish ballads her mother had hummed while kneading bread. "I need to return to the store," she said finally. "Yes," Caldwell agreed. "And remember, we dine with the Prescotts tonight. Wear your green dress. Mr. Prescott is considering a large order for his mining operation." Eliza nodded, already walking away. But instead of returning to the store, she found herself circling around to the back of the jail. The singing was clearer here, coming through a high window crossed with iron bars. She stood in the narrow alley, listening. The words were in Apache, incomprehensible to her, but the emotion transcended language. It spoke of loss, of land taken, of promises broken. It was the sound of a people watching their world disappear beneath iron rails and legal documents they couldn't read. A shadow fell across the window, and the singing stopped. Greyhawk's face appeared behind the bars, those storm-gray eyes finding her immediately, as if he'd known she was there. "You should not be here," he said. His English was careful, accented but clear. "I know," Eliza replied, but made no move to leave. They regarded each other through the bars. Two people who shouldn't have anything in common but somehow recognized the cages that held them, his made of wood and iron, hers of expectations and economics. "They will blame us for the attack," he said matter-of-factly. "It is easier than finding the truth." "What is the truth?" A bitter smile touched his lips. "The truth is that men took sacred water to wash the dirt from their surveys. The truth is that promises written on paper mean nothing when gold or silver or railroad money appears. The truth is that your people see mine as obstacles to be removed." "They're not my people," Eliza said before she could stop herself. His eyebrows rose slightly. "No, then whose people are you?" The question hung between them like dust in a shaft of sunlight. Before she could answer, footsteps echoed from the street. Eliza pressed herself against the building's rough wall, heart hammering. "Tomorrow they move us to Tucson," Greyhawk said quietly. "To trial, they say. But trials need evidence, and evidence can be created as easily as destroyed." "That's not," Eliza began, then stopped. "Wasn't it justice in Sierra Verde?" Justice wore a badge, but answered to whoever held the most influence. "I'm sorry," she said instead. "Why?" He seemed genuinely curious. "You did not attack the survey team. You did not arrest us. You did not create the world we both live in." "No, but I benefit from it. My store, my comfort, my—" She touched the letter in her pocket. "My future, all built on land that was yours." "Was," he agreed. "The important word." He shifted, and she heard the clink of metal. Not chains. Sheriff Boyd hadn't chained them, but perhaps weapons taken. Dignity removed bit by bit. You know why they call me Apache Alpha? Eliza shook her head. White men need names they understand, categories to place us in. Alpha like wolves, like animals. It makes us less human, easier to cage. His voice held no bitterness, just a tired understanding. My true name is Tate. It means greyhawk in your language, so perhaps they are not entirely wrong. Tate, she repeated, trying to shape her mouth around the unfamiliar sounds. He almost smiled then, a real expression that transformed his face from stern warrior to something more complex, more human. Close enough. More footsteps. Closer now. Eliza knew she should leave, but something held her in place. Is there anything you need? Food? Water? The sheriff feeds us. He paused. But if you have bread that is not hard enough to break teeth, the young ones would be grateful. Young ones. She'd been so focused on him. She'd barely noticed that 2 of the arrested men were hardly more than boys, perhaps 16 or 17. I'll bring some tonight, she promised. No, his voice turned sharp. Not at night. Too dangerous for you. Your reputation. My reputation is about to be sold to a banker from Tucson. She interrupted. I think I can risk it for bread. This time he did smile, and it was like watching the sun break through storm clouds. You are not what I expected from a shopkeeper's daughter. And you're not what I expected from an Apache Alpha, she countered. Good, he said softly. Expectations are just another kind of cage. The footsteps were at the corner now. Eliza gathered her skirts and hurried away, but his words followed her through the dusty streets, past the familiar storefronts, all the way back to Hart's General Goods, where Caldwell waited with ledgers and letters, and the promise of a future that felt more like captivity with each passing day. That night, she sat through dinner at the Prescotts with a smile painted on her face, discussing the weather and the railroad's progress and the promising nature of Mr. Hale's banking concerns. But her mind kept drifting to gray eyes behind bars, to a voice singing of loss, to the word was that held the weight of a world changing too fast for anyone to stop it. When she finally returned home, she wrapped fresh bread and dried fruit in clean cloth, added a small jar of honey from her private store, and set it aside for morning. Through her bedroom window, she could see the jail, a dark bulk against the star-filled sky. Somewhere inside, 5 men waited for a justice that would be decided by those who had already judged them guilty. She touched the letter in her pocket one more time, feeling the expensive paper, the confident script promising her a comfortable future as Mrs. Franklin Hale. Then she lit a candle and penned a different sort of letter, one to herself, though she didn't yet know it, a promise that some cages could be opened, some expectations defied, some truths uncovered before they were buried beneath progress and profit. The night wind picked up, rattling her window pane and carrying the faint sound of singing from the jail. Not mournful now, but defiant, a warrior's song that spoke of endurance rather than defeat. Eliza blew out her candle and lay in the darkness, listening, until sleep finally claimed her. She dreamed of dust and iron bars, of gray eyes that saw through comfortable lies, of choices that waited like shadows at the edge of dawn. And somewhere in those dreams, she heard her mother's voice singing an old Irish ballad about a woman who chose love over safety, freedom over comfort, truth over the easy path. When morning came, it would bring decisions that would change everything. But for now, in the space between night and dawn, Eliza Hart existed in a world of possibility, where cages could be opened and expectations shattered like glass on Sierra Verde's unforgiving stones. The third night of conversations through wooden bars had become a ritual Eliza couldn't abandon. She moved through the darkness behind Main Street like a ghost, her father's old boots muffling her steps better than her proper lady's shoes ever could. The bundle of provisions hung heavy in her hands, bread still warm from her evening baking, dried venison she'd traded for secretly, and a precious orange from the store's meager supply. You risk too much. Tate's voice came before she even reached the window. He'd taken to waiting for her, though he'd never admit it. "And you risk too little," Eliza countered, settling herself on the overturned crate she'd positioned beneath the window. "Tell me about the water at Coyote Pass." Through the bars, she could see his profile outlined against the faint light from the sheriff's office. The other prisoners slept, but Tate remained watchful, always vigilant. "Why do you want to know?" "Because Sheriff Boyd won't ask the right questions. And the trial." She paused, choosing her words carefully. Trials need truth, not just testimony. He was quiet for so long, she wondered if he'd decided not to trust her after all. Then, the survey team came to Canada del Alba, what you call Coyote Pass. It is not just water there. It is where the grandmothers take the young women to learn the old ways, where the medicine grows that heals fever, where our ancestors spoke with the mountain spirits. "Sacred land," Eliza murmured. "Your word, not ours. For us, it simply is. Like your heartbeat is not sacred, it just is necessary for life." He shifted, and she heard the rustle of straw. The surveyors came with their instruments, marking lines across the earth like scars. When our people asked them to leave, they laughed. When we insisted, they drew guns. "But the report says your people attacked first." "Reports say many things." His voice held a bitter amusement. "Did the report mention the surveyor who relieved himself in the spring? Did it note how they washed their equipment in water that must remain pure for ceremonies? Did it record their words about how Apache would soon be memories, like the buffalo?" Eliza's hands clenched around the provision bundle. She'd grown up hearing such casual cruelty, had learned to let it wash over her like rain. But hearing it through Tate's eyes, not through his experience, made it sharp and real. "There's more," she said. It wasn't a question. 3 nights of conversation had taught her to read his silences. There is always more. He moved closer to the window, and she could see his face more clearly. The moonlight caught on a healing cut across his cheekbone. "The survey maps, they are not for the railroad." "What do you mean?" "You're Mr. Hale, the banker who courts you. His interests extend beyond rails and commerce. The survey team carried his personal seal on their documents." Eliza's breath caught. "How do you know about Franklin?" "Guards talk when they think we don't understand. Sheriff Boyd received several telegrams from Tucson. Mr. Hale is very concerned about his investment in Sierra Verde." Tate's gray eyes found hers through the bars. "And about his investment in you." Heat flooded her cheeks, gratitude for the darkness overwhelming her embarrassment. "I'm not an investment." "No, then why does he send letters full of numbers, dowry calculations, profit projections from combining his banking with your store's distribution? The value of respectability in territorial politics." "You've read how—" "I read English better than I speak it. Mission schools are thorough, even if their lessons come with costs." He reached through the bars, and she reflexively handed him the bundle. Their fingers brushed, and she felt calluses that spoke of bowstrings and hard riding. "Your Sheriff Boyd is careless with papers on his desk." "He's not my sheriff," Eliza protested. "No, but he answers to your people's law, and that law bends toward gold." He passed the food to someone behind him, probably young Samuel Crow Feather, who at 16 was the youngest of the prisoners. "What do you know of Canada del Alba's water rights?" "Nothing. I didn't even know its Apache name until you told me." "Then you should learn. Knowledge is a weapon your people respect, even from women." The casual acceptance in his tone, not condescending, just matter-of-fact, made her throat tight. How strange that this Apache warrior showed her more regard than the civilized men who patted her hand and spoke of her pretty head. "Teach me," she said. For the next hour, he drew maps in words describing the network of springs that fed the desert, the seasonal flows, the places where water ran year-round. Canada del Alba sat at the heart of it all, a natural cistern that collected rain and snowmelt, releasing it slowly through the dry months. "Control the source, control the territory," Eliza murmured, understanding dawning. If someone claimed Canada del Alba, every ranch, every town, every mine for 50 miles would depend on them for water. Tate's voice was grim. Your Mr. Hale understands this. The railroad is an excuse, a pretty story to tell while the real theft happens in legal documents. We have to tell someone, the governor, the federal marshals. Tell them what that Apache prisoners claim innocence, that a banker seeks profit. He almost laughed, but the sound held no humor. Your world runs on evidence, and evidence can be bought, sold, or buried. Eliza stood abruptly, pacing the narrow alley. Her mind raced through possibilities, each more unlikely than the last. The territorial government was 3 days away by stage. By then, the prisoners would be in Tucson. The trial rushed through. Sentences passed. What about the survey maps themselves? She asked suddenly. If they show water resources instead of railroad routes, hidden or destroyed by now? Not necessarily. She thought of Hale's letters, his meticulous nature, his pride. Franklin keeps copies of everything. He calls it insurance against uncertain times. If he has a set, you would steal from your intended. The word sat heavy between them. Intended, as if she were a package already addressed and stamped. It's not stealing if the documents prove a crime, she said firmly, spoken like someone who has never been caught. But there was approval in his tone. You think like Apache now seeing the hunt before it begins. I work in the store's office. I know where he keeps documents when he visits. The plan formed as she spoke. He's coming day after tomorrow for the monthly territorial banking meeting. He always uses Caldwell's office for private business. And if you're caught, Eliza thought of the green dress waiting in her wardrobe. The wedding Caldwell had already half planned. The life stretching before her like railroad tracks, straight, predictable, leading nowhere she wanted to go. Then I'll face consequences, but at least I'll have chosen them. Tate was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice carried something she hadn't heard before, respect mixed with concern. You speak of cages, but you don't understand. My cage has bars I can see, walls I can touch. Yours is made of other people's expectations, and those are harder to escape. If you do this and fail, they won't just lock you away. They'll bury you in propriety, watch you every moment. Turn your life into a prison of courtesy and careful smiles. It already is, she whispered. Footsteps echoed from the street, the night deputy making rounds. Eliza pressed against the wall, holding her breath until they passed. I should go, she said. Eliza, her name on his lips stopped her. In 3 nights, he'd never used it. Why do you care what happens to us? She considered lying, offering noble words about justice and truth. But he deserved honesty. Because when I saw you that first day, I recognized something. You looked at Sheriff Boyd's guns the way I look at Franklin's letters, like their chains were measuring, waiting for the right moment to break them. And if that moment comes, then we'll see who's stronger, their locks or our will to be free. She turned to go, but his voice followed her. The young ones know what you risk bringing food. Samuel Crowfeather says you have the heart of a warrior. Tell Samuel Crowfeather that warriors come in different forms, she replied. Some carry spears. Some carry account ledgers and know which numbers don't add up. His soft laugh followed her through the darkness, warming her more than her father's old coat. The next morning brought complications. Caldwell waited in the store. Franklin Hale's latest letter spread on the counter like a declaration of war. He's moved up his visit. Caldwell announced without preamble. He'll arrive this afternoon. You'll serve tea, discuss the wedding arrangements, and show proper enthusiasm for your future. And if I don't, Caldwell's pale eyes narrowed. Then I'll sign the marriage contract as your guardian. You're 24, Eliza, well past the age of romantic foolishness. Your father's debts are yours, not mine, she interrupted. Father left the store to me, not you. The debts you accumulated after his death. The slap came fast, more shocking than painful. Eliza touched her cheek, tasting copper where her teeth had cut her lip. "You will not speak to me that way." Caldwell's control had cracked, showing something ugly beneath. "Your father was a fool who extended credit to every sob story that walked through that door. I've kept this business alive, and you'll show gratitude by securing its future through this marriage." Eliza straightened, drawing on every lesson in composure her mother had taught. "Of course, Mr. Caldwell, I apologize for my outburst." He studied her suspiciously, but found only proper contrition. "See that you remember your place, Mr. Hale expects a biddable wife, not a sharp-tongued harpy." She spent the morning in the store, smiling at customers, measuring flour, cutting fabric, all while her mind worked through possibilities. The survey maps would be in Hale's traveling desk. She'd seen it before, leather-bound and locked. But locks were just puzzles waiting to be solved. At noon, she watched through the window as a dust cloud announced the approaching stage. Her hands steadied as she smoothed her apron, checked her hair. She'd learned long ago that the best disguise was meeting expectations. Let them see a nervous bride-to-be, and they'd never notice the woman planning their downfall. The afternoon crawled by in a haze of tea and tiny sandwiches. Franklin Hale sat in their modest parlor like a banker examining collateral, his gold watch chain catching the light as he outlined their future. "The wedding should be swift," he declared. "No need for lengthy engagements in the territories. I've already begun renovations on the Tucson house. You'll find it quite comfortable." "How thoughtful," Eliza murmured, pouring more tea with steady hands. "I've also arranged for your store to be managed by my associate, Mr. Garrett. You needn't trouble yourself with commerce once we're married." "But I enjoy the work." "Nonsense." He waved dismissively. "A banker's wife has social obligations, charity committees, entertaining territorial officials, far more suitable than measuring beans and gossiping with farmers' wives." Caldwell beamed approval while Eliza bit her tongue. Let them plan. Let them arrange her life like items on a shelf. She had plans of her own. "If you'll excuse me," she said, rising gracefully, "I should check on dinner preparations." Neither man noticed when she slipped into the office instead of the kitchen. The traveling desk sat on Caldwell's table, tempting as forbidden fruit. The lock was simple. Her father had taught her to pick locks when she was 12, a game that scandalized her mother but proved useful when customers lost keys to their purchases. Inside, stacked with Hale's typical precision, were the documents that confirmed everything Tate had suspected. Survey maps that showed water sources, not railroad routes. Legal papers prepared to claim abandoned Apache territory. Letters from investors discussing the fortune to be made controlling water in a thirsty land. And at the bottom, most damning of all, correspondence with certain government officials assuring that any Apache resistance would be met with military force, that trials would be swift, that the territory would be cleared for progress. Eliza's hands shook as she selected the most incriminating pieces. She couldn't take everything that would be noticed immediately, but a few key documents tucked beneath her corset. "My dear," she spun, heart hammering. Franklin stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "I was just—" Her mind went blank. Looking for writing paper. He stepped closer, and she smelled his pomade, saw the calculation in his eyes. "How fortunate. I have something that requires your signature." He produced a document from his jacket. "Our engagement contract. Best to have things official, don't you think?" Eliza looked at the paper, seeing her future condensed to legal terms. Her dowry, the store. Her obligations, obedience and childbearing. Her restrictions, no commercial activity without spousal permission. "I should read it first," she said. "Of course." But he didn't move, clearly expecting her to sign immediately. A distant sound saved her raised voices from the street. Franklin frowned, moving to the window. "What now?" "The Apache prisoners," Caldwell reported from the parlor. "Sheriff's loading them for transport to Tucson. Seems some citizens are expressing opinions about justice." Franklin's smile was cold. Good. Let them see what happens to those who stand in the way of progress. He turned back to Eliza. We'll finish this later. I should speak with Sheriff Boyd about ensuring the prisoners reach trial. He strode out, leaving the contract on the desk. Eliza waited until his footsteps faded, then slipped the stolen documents inside her corset, the papers cold against her skin. Evidence. Truth. Weapons in a war she'd only just realized she'd been fighting all her life. That night, she stood at her window watching the empty jail, feeling the weight of knowledge and choice. Somewhere on the road to Tucson, Tate and the others faced uncertain justice, but she held proof of their innocence, of a conspiracy larger than one ambush, of greed dressed as progress. The question was, what would she do with it? As if in answer, the wind picked up, rattling her window with insistent fingers. Desert wind carrying the scent of sage and secrets, whispering of hard choices and harder consequences. Eliza Hart touched the papers hidden beneath her dress and made her decision. Some doors, she realized, were never truly locked. They only awaited someone brave enough or desperate enough to push them open. Tomorrow would bring that test. Tonight. She planned and prayed and prepared to discover just what kind of warrior a shopkeeper's daughter could become. The sandstorm struck Sierra Verde like a fist of the old gods, turning the world into a howling wall of red dust and flying debris. Eliza pressed her back against the livery stable's wall, her father's coat wrapped tight, a wet bandana covering her nose and mouth. The timing was either a curse or a blessing, she couldn't decide which. The transport wagon sat abandoned in the street, its guards seeking shelter as the storm raged. Through the swirling dust, she could barely make out the shapes of the prisoners huddled in the cage-like structure. Exposed to the elements, Sheriff Boyd had retreated to the saloon with most of his deputies, confident that no one would attempt escape in weather that could strip skin from bone. They were wrong. Eliza had spent 2 days planning after Franklin's visit, studying the transport schedule, learning the guards' routines. The stolen documents were hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her room, but they meant nothing if the men accused of the crime were convicted and hanged before the truth could surface. She pushed through the storm, each step a battle against the wind. Grit filled her eyes, nose, throat, her hands, wrapped in torn petticoats, were already raw from gripping the rope she'd taken from the stable. The keys, those had been harder. But young Deputy Morrison had a weakness for laudanum when his war wounds ached, and sandstorms always made the shrapnel in his legs sing. The wagon loomed out of the darkness. She could hear voices, Apache words mixed with English curses as the prisoners tried to shield themselves from the storm's fury. "Don't move," she called, hoping they could hear her over the wind. "It's Eliza Hart." A shadow shifted Tate's voice, rough with dust. "You should not be here." "Neither should you." She fumbled with the keys, her hands clumsy in their wrappings. The lock was already clogged with grit. "Can you ride?" "What are you doing?" This from Samuel Crowfeather, his young voice cracking with fear and hope. "Giving you a choice." The lock finally turned with a grinding protest. "There are horses in the stable. I've cut their tethers. Food and water in the saddlebags. The storm will cover your tracks for miles." "And you," Tate dropped from the wagon, landing silent despite the chains on his ankles. "What happens when the storm passes and they find us gone?" "That's my concern." She knelt to work on his leg irons, grateful for the lock-picking lessons of her youth. "Unless you'd prefer to wait for Tucson justice." He caught her hands, stilling them. Even through the wrappings, his touch burned. "They will destroy you for this." They were going to destroy me anyway. The shackles fell away with a clatter lost in the wind. Just more slowly, with wedding rings instead of chains. The other prisoners were climbing down 5 men whose only crime was defending sacred water from defilement. Eliza worked fast, freeing each one, trying not to think about tomorrow, about consequences, about the life she was throwing away with each opened lock. "The stable!" she shouted over the storm. "Horses, supplies." Ride south to the Dragoon Mountains, then east. There's a trading post at Sulphur Springs. The owner owes me favors. Come with us. Tate's command cut through the wind. Eliza laughed, wild and free. A white woman riding with Apache. They'd have the cavalry after us by dawn. And when they discover your part in this, I'll deny everything. Claim I was in my room, terrified by the storm. She pushed him toward the stable. Go before the wind dies. But he caught her arm, pulling her into the relative shelter of the wagon's bulk. You have a warrior's heart, but a fool's strategy. They will know. Your stepfather. The banker, they need someone to blame. Then I'll... Listen. His hands gripped her shoulders, his face close enough that she could see his eyes even through the swirling dust. Take one of the horses. Ride with us until the storm breaks. Then circle back. Say you were checking on the store when the storm hit, took shelter in the desert. Your dress is already ruined. Your hands bloodied. It will look true. It was madness. But then, freeing condemned prisoners in a sandstorm was already madness. What was a little more? Samuel, Tate called. Take the others. Get the horses. We follow in 5 minutes. The young man nodded, understanding passing between them without words. In moments. Eliza and Tate were alone in the howling darkness. Why? She asked. Why trust me? Because you see cages others pretend don't exist. He pulled a leather cord from his neck, pressing something into her hand. And because trust, once given, must be honored. She looked down at the small stone in her palm, turquoise carved with symbols she couldn't read. It was warm from his skin, smooth from years of wearing. I can't. You must. Where we go, you cannot follow. Not yet. But this will tell my people you are... He searched for the English word. Under protection. That you chose to see us as human when others saw only obstacles. Shouts pierced the storm, the guards discovering the empty wagon. Time had run out. They ran for the stable, Eliza's hand in his, trusting him to guide her through the blinding storm. The horses were ready, Samuel holding the reins of a sturdy mare. Can you ride? Tate asked. Better than I can pour tea, she assured him, swinging into the saddle with practiced ease that made him smile. They burst from the stable into chaos. The storm had become their ally, hiding them in its fury. Eliza pulled her hat low, following Tate's shadow as they raced through the streets. Behind them, bells began to ring, alarm bells, church bells, every bell in Sierra Verde screaming their escape into the wind. The desert swallowed them whole. Here, the storm was a living thing, scouring and savage. Eliza bent low over her horse's neck, trusting the animal's instincts and Tate's guidance. Time lost meaning. There was only wind and sand and the steady rhythm of hooves on stone. When her horse stumbled, Tate was there, his hand steadying her mount. When the wind tried to tear her from the saddle, he positioned his horse to shield her. And when exhaustion made her sway, he called a halt in the shelter of a rock formation. Drink, he commanded, pressing a canteen into her hands. The water was warm and tasted of leather, but nothing had ever been so sweet. Around them, the other men materialized from the storm like ghosts, checking horses, sharing what little food they had. How much further? She asked. To safety days? To where you must turn back another hour. He studied her in what little light filtered through the storm. Your hands need tending. She looked down, surprised to see blood seeping through the makeshift bandages. The rains had torn through the thin fabric, leaving her palms raw. Without asking permission, he took her hands in his, unwrapping them with careful efficiency. His touch was gentle as he cleaned the wounds with water from his canteen, tore strips from his own shirt to rebind them properly. You should have worn gloves, he said softly. I should have done many things. She watched his face as he worked, memorizing the lines around his eyes, the scar through his left eyebrow, the way concentration made him bite his lower lip. I don't regret this. Not yet. He finished the last bandage, but didn't release her hands. Regret comes with dawn, with consequences, with the weight of choices made in darkness. Speaking from experience, every scar tells a story of choices. His thumb traced the edge of her palm, careful of the wounds. Some we regret, some we would make again, knowing the cost. The wind was dying. She could feel it in the way the sand settled, in the growing spaces between gusts. Their time was ending. "I should go back," she whispered. "Yes?" But he didn't move, and neither did she. Samuel coughed politely from somewhere in the darkness. Reality crashed back. They were fugitives in the desert, not lovers in a story. Eliza pulled her hands free, immediately missing the warmth. "The documents I took," she said, businesslike now. "They prove everything you said about the water conspiracy. I'll find a way to get them to the governor, or a federal marshal, someone who can't be bought. Be careful. Desperate men do desperate things, and you've made yourself their enemy." She stood, brushing dust from her ruined dress. "I was already their enemy. I just didn't know it yet." He rose with her, and for a moment they stood face to face in the dying storm. "This is not goodbye," he said firmly. "Our paths will cross again." "How can you know that?" "Because warriors recognize each other, even across battlefields." He touched the turquoise now hidden beneath her collar. "And because some debts can only be paid face to face." She wanted to kiss him. The thought shocked her with its clarity, its impropriety, its absolute rightness. But Samuel was holding her horse, and the others were mounting up, and the moment passed like smoke. The ride back was a blur of exhaustion and adrenaline. She left them at a dry wash, watching their shadows disappear into the pre-dawn darkness. Then she turned her horse north, riding hard for Sierra Verde, constructing her story with each mile. She had been worried about storm damage to the store, had taken her horse when the storm hit, been forced to shelter among the rocks, had seen nothing, heard nothing, knew nothing about prisoners or escapes or the chaos that must be consuming the town. By the time she reached the outskirts, the sun was rising, painting the desert in shades of blood and gold. She dismounted, leading her exhausted horse, making sure to stumble, to look properly lost and frightened. Deputy Morrison found her first, his face a mix of relief and suspicion. "Miss Hart, we've been searching everywhere." "The storm," she gasped, not needing to fake exhaustion. "I was so frightened. My horse bolted. I couldn't find my way back." He supported her into town, where chaos reigned. The empty transport wagon sat like an accusation in the street. Sheriff Boyd paced before it, his face grim. Caldwell stood with Franklin Hale, both men wearing expressions that promised retribution. "Eliza!" Caldwell's voice cracked like a whip. "Where have you been?" She let herself sway, Morrison catching her elbow. "The storm. I was checking the store." "During a sandstorm." Franklin's eyes were cold, calculating. "I thought I heard glass breaking. Father always said the store came first." She touched her forehead, wincing. "I'm sorry. I think I need to sit down." It was Sheriff Boyd who surprised her. He studied her torn dress, her bandaged hands, the genuine exhaustion in her face. "Get her inside," he ordered Morrison. "She's been through enough." As Morrison helped her toward the store, she heard Franklin's voice behind them. "This is too convenient. Sheriff, the girl has been visiting the prisoners." "Visiting ain't freeing, Mr. Hale," Boyd interrupted. "And unless you got proof otherwise, I'll thank you not to accuse respectable women of crimes." Inside the store, Eliza collapsed in a chair, her performance becoming reality as the night caught up with her. Through the window, she could see riders forming up a posse, ready to hunt. They would ride hard and find nothing but wind-scoured rock and false trails. Morrison brought her water, hovering uncertainly. "You really didn't see nothing, Miss Hart?" She met his eyes, young and worried and kind. "I saw the storm, Deputy. I saw darkness and dust and thought I might die alone in the desert. That's all I saw." He nodded, wanting to believe her, wanting to believe in something good and simple in a world that had shown him too much complexity in his young life. After he left, Eliza sat alone in her father's store, feeling the weight of the turquoise against her skin, the sting of her torn palms, the echo of Tate's touch. Through the window, dawn painted Sierra Verde in deceptively gentle colors, hiding the ugliness beneath. She had chosen her side, burned her bridges, freed men the law had already condemned. There would be consequences. She could feel them gathering like storm clouds on the horizon. But for now, 5 men rode free across the desert, and truth lay hidden beneath her floorboards. And somewhere beyond the mountains, a warrior carried matching scars on his palms from shared reigns and desperate flight. Eliza Hart closed her eyes and smiled. Some cages, she had learned, were worth breaking, even if freedom came with a price measured in blood and dust and the promise of darker storms to come. The Apache camp materialized from the landscape like a mirage, becoming real hide shelters tucked beneath cottonwoods, nearly invisible until you were among them. Eliza's mare picked her way down the narrow canyon trail, following Tate's sure lead. It had been 3 weeks since the escape, 3 weeks of Franklin's increasingly aggressive pursuit, of Caldwell's cold fury, of the town's whispers following her everywhere. 3 weeks until the night she'd found Deputy Morrison at her door, blood seeping through his shirt, whispering a warning. "They're coming for you at dawn. Hale's got a judge in his pocket, says he's got evidence you helped them escape. Run, Miss Hart, run now." So she had run, following the turquoise's promise and a map drawn in words during those nights at the jail. South to the Dragoon Mountains, east to Sulphur Springs, then north along paths only Apache knew. Her hands had healed but carried new calluses from the journey. Her dresses were gone, replaced by practical riding clothes that scandalized no one because there was no one to scandalize in the empty desert. Now, as children peered from behind shelter flaps and women paused in their work to stare, Eliza wondered if she'd simply traded one form of judgment for another. An elderly woman emerged from the largest shelter, her face a map of years and wisdom. She spoke in Apache, words flowing like water over stone. Tate dismounted, helping Eliza down before responding in the same language. The conversation lasted several minutes, during which Eliza caught her own name and saw the woman's sharp eyes assess her from dusty boots to sun-lightened hair. "This is Naichi," Tate said finally. "She leads this camp. She says you may stay, but you must earn your place. No one eats who does not work." "I wouldn't expect otherwise," Eliza replied, meeting Naichi's gaze steadily. "I know how to work." The old woman said something that might have been approval or skepticism, then turned and walked away. The crowd dispersed slowly, curiosity temporarily satisfied. "Come," Tate said. "You'll stay with Cornflower. She has space since her daughter married into the Chiricahua band." Cornflower proved to be a woman near Eliza's age with kind eyes and calloused hands. She showed Eliza to a corner of her shelter a blanket, a water jar, space for the few possessions in her saddlebags. "You speak English?" Eliza asked hopefully. "Little," Cornflower admitted. "You learn Apache. Better for you." The first days were harder than anything Eliza had experienced. Not the physical work she'd always worked hard in the store, but here, everything she knew was useless. She couldn't identify edible plants from poisonous ones, couldn't weave baskets that held water, couldn't read the subtle social rules that governed camp life. She burned stew, pricked her fingers bloody trying to work with yucca fibers, mixed up Apache words in ways that sent children into giggling fits. Samuel Crowfeather, recovered from their flight, tried to help, but he was often away with the other young men, hunting or standing guard. It was the children who saved her. They found her attempts at their language hilarious, but were patient teachers, pointing at objects and repeating words until she got them right. They showed her which roots to dig, how to strip prickly pear cactus of its spines, where to find the best clay for pottery. On her 5th day, She witnessed an argument between two women over a deer hide. The dispute grew heated, drawing others into taking sides. Naichi sat watching, making no move to intervene. "Why doesn't she stop them?" Eliza asked Samuel quietly. "Not her place," he replied. "They must find their own balance." But when one woman raised a grinding stone threateningly, Eliza stepped forward without thinking. "Stop," she said in careful Apache, then switched to English. "This helps no one. The hide is large enough to share. Cut it here." She drew a line with her finger. "And both have what they need." The women stared at her, then at each other. The one with the stone lowered it slowly. After a moment, they began discussing the division Eliza had suggested. That evening, Naichi approached her at the cook fire. "You have courage," the old woman said in accented English. "Also foolishness, but sometimes they are the same. I couldn't watch them hurt each other over something that could be shared." Eliza replied. Naichi studied her. "You know plants healing." "Some. My mother taught me about herbs, poultices, simple things." "Show me." It became Eliza's entry point. While Apache medicine was far more sophisticated than what she knew. Some basics translated. Clean water for wounds, willow bark for fever, rest and nourishment for recovery. When a stomach illness swept through the camp, affecting mainly the children, Eliza worked alongside the medicine woman, brewing teas and keeping the sick ones hydrated. "You have gentle hands," the medicine woman told her one night, watching Eliza cool a fevered child's forehead. "This is good, but you must learn to see sickness before it shows. The body speaks if you know how to listen." Slowly, painfully, Eliza began to understand. Not just the language, though that came with daily practice. She learned to read the sky for weather, the ground for tracks, the faces around her for unspoken communication. She learned that Tate was not a chief in the white man's sense, but a leader by consensus, his word carrying weight because of wisdom proven over time. She learned his true place when warriors from another band arrived, travel-worn and grim. They spoke rapidly in Apache, gesturing northward. Eliza caught fragment soldiers, settlements burned, families scattered. "What are they saying?" she asked Samuel. His young face was troubled. "The army is moving against the northern bands. They say any Apache found off the reservation will be shot on sight." "But this isn't reservation land." "No, but bullets don't read maps." That night, the camp debated. Some wanted to fight, to join their northern brothers. Others counseled hiding, waiting for the storm to pass. Tate listened to all, his face giving nothing away. When he finally spoke, his words carried quiet authority. Eliza couldn't follow the Apache, but she understood the result. They would not seek battle, but neither would they flee. They would defend if attacked, but their strength lay in knowledge of the land, not open warfare. After the council, she found him standing at the edge of camp, staring at the stars. "You think I'm wrong," he said without turning. It wasn't a question. "I think you're trying to save lives in a world that values Apache lives at nothing," she replied. "That's not wrong. It's impossible, but not wrong." He smiled grimly. "You understand too well for someone here so short a time." "I understand cages. Remember, sometimes the walls are made of other people's hatred." They stood in comfortable silence, the night sounds of the desert surrounding them. Finally, he spoke again. "Your banker searches for you. My scouts report he has hired trackers, offers reward money." "I know." She'd known it was only a matter of time. "I have something he wants, evidence that could destroy him." "Then why do you stay? Why not take your evidence to authorities who might listen?" Eliza considered the question. Why did she stay? The simple answer was safety. Franklin couldn't reach her here. But watching Cornflower teach her daughter to weave, seeing Samuel help younger boys with their first hunt, treating Naichi's arthritis with simple remedies, these had become more than mere survival. "Because I'm learning things I need to know," she said finally. "Not just survival skills, I'm learning how to fight systems designed to crush people. Your people have survived centuries of such systems. That knowledge is worth more than any evidence. And when you have learned what then? Then I use it. Franklin Hale is one man, but he represents hundreds like him. Men who see land and water and people as commodities to be acquired. She touched the turquoise at her throat. Someone needs to stop them. Someone who understands their world but isn't bound by its rules. A dangerous path for a woman alone. Who says I'll be alone? She turned to face him. Your people need allies who can navigate white law, who can fight with papers and testimony. I need allies who understand that justice and law aren't always the same thing. He studied her in the starlight. You're proposing an alliance. I'm proposing survival. For both our peoples. She gestured at the camp. How long can you hide here? How long before the army or the trackers or simple starvation forces you to choose between surrender and death? And you believe you can change this? I believe I can try. I have evidence of corruption that reaches to the territorial government. I know which officials take bribes, which judges can be bought. That knowledge, properly used, could protect places like Canada del Alba, could ensure water rights, could mean the difference between your people surviving or being erased. You speak like a warrior planning a campaign, he said softly. I learned from the best, she replied, matching his tone. A warrior who taught me that sometimes the greatest victory is avoiding a battle you cannot win. Something shifted between them, the careful distance they'd maintained since her arrival narrowing. His hand rose to touch the leather cord around her neck, following it to where the turquoise rested against her collar. This stone carries obligations, he said. Protection, yes, but also connection. Do you understand what you accepted when you took it? Her breath caught. Tell me. It means you are part of us now. Not Apache that is blood, not choice, but under our protection, our responsibility. And we are under yours. His fingers lingered against the warm stone. It is not a bond lightly made or easily broken. I don't want it broken, she whispered. His hand moved from the stone to cup her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with the same gentleness he'd shown tending her wounded palms. You should. This path leads only to hardship. Your own people will call you traitor. Mine will always see you as outsider. Where is the happiness in that? Where is the happiness in surrender? She countered. In watching injustice flourish because fighting it is hard. He had no answer for that, or perhaps his answer was in the way he drew her closer, in the way she melted against him like water finding its level. They stood wrapped in darkness and desert silence. Two people caught between worlds, finding solace in shared understanding. A coyote's howl broke the moment. Tate stepped back, though his hand lingered on her cheek. Tomorrow, the warriors council again. The northern bands send messages, seeking unity. There will be those who say we should strike first, before the soldiers come. And you, what will you counsel? I will remind them that revenge and justice are different things. That dead warriors protect no one. That sometimes the greatest courage is in waiting for the right moment. He smiled sadly. I will sound like a coward to some. Leadership is lonelier than I imagined, Eliza observed. Yes, but less lonely than it was. He left her there, returning to his responsibilities, to the endless balance between protecting his people and preserving their hope. Eliza remained, watching stars wheel overhead, feeling the weight of the turquoise against her skin. In the morning, she would return to learning new words, new skills, new ways of seeing the world. She would treat injuries and settle disputes and slowly earn her place in this community that had every reason to reject her. But tonight, she allowed herself to dream of a different future, one where evidence could topple corruption, where water rights could be secured through law instead of blood, where a shopkeeper's daughter and an Apache leader could build something new from the ruins of two failing worlds. It was a foolish dream, perhaps, but as Nietzsche had said, sometimes courage and foolishness were the same thing. And in a land where names meant everything, Apache Alpha, Miss Hart, Greyhawk. The bankers intended perhaps the truest courage lay in choosing which names to keep and which to leave behind in the dust. The coyote howled again, closer now, and Eliza smiled. Even predators had their place in the desert's balance. The trick was learning when to run, when to fight, and when to stand perfectly still and let the danger pass by. She was learning. The night before leaving camp felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Eliza packed her few belongings by moonlight, the practical clothes that had replaced her town dresses, the medicine pouch Naichi had gifted her, the documents that could bring down Franklin Hale still wrapped in oilcloth. Her hands moved mechanically while her mind raced through everything that could go wrong. Tate found her by the spring, where she'd gone to fill her water skins for the journey. He moved silently, but she'd learned to sense his presence, a skill that still surprised her. Second thoughts, he asked, settling beside her on the flat stone. Third and fourth thoughts, she admitted. But they all lead to the same conclusion. The information I have is worthless hidden here. Sheriff Boyd's letter proves he was investigating Hale before he died. Combined with the survey maps and investment documents, it's enough to interest a federal marshal. If you can reach one, if they listen, if Hale doesn't find you first. If, she sealed the water skin with practiced movements. Life is nothing but ifs. The only certainty is that doing nothing condemns your people to slow strangulation by law and policy. They sat in silence, listening to the spring's quiet murmur. This place, she'd learned, was why the camp existed here, water that ran year-round. Hidden in a box canyon the maps didn't show, but Canada del Alba, the greater water source Hale coveted, lay 2 days north. That's where everything would be decided. I need to see it, she said suddenly. Canada del Alba, before I go to the authorities, I need to understand what we're really fighting for. It's dangerous. Hale's men patrol there now, establishing their claim. Then we go carefully. She turned to face him. You've taught me to move through this land like smoke. Let me use those lessons. He considered her for a long moment. We leave before dawn. Tell no one. The sky was still dark when they slipped from camp, their horses' hooves wrapped in cloth to muffle sound. Eliza wore Apache dress more practical for hard riding than anything from her former life. The turquoise rested warm against her skin, a constant reminder of obligations accepted. They rode in companionable silence, navigating by stars and the intimate knowledge Tate carried of every wash and ridge. As the first pale light touched the eastern mountains, he led them into a narrow canyon she would have ridden past without seeing. We leave the horses here, he said, dismounting in a grove of cottonwoods. The last approach is on foot. They climbed, following a path that was more suggestion than reality. Eliza's breathing came hard in the thin air, but months of camp life had strengthened her. When Tate offered his hand over a difficult passage, she took it without the hesitation that would have paralyzed her former self. Then they crested the final ridge, and Canada del Alba spread before them. The dawn light turned the water to molten silver, a natural basin carved by centuries of patient erosion. Springs fed it from multiple sources, creating a wetland that supported cottonwoods, willows, and grass that stayed green even in drought years. Birds filled the air with morning songs, and she could see deer tracks in the muddy edges. Oh, she breathed, understanding flooding through her. This wasn't just water, it was life itself in a thirsty land. My people have come here for generations, Tate said softly. For ceremonies, for healing, for counsel. Children learn to swim in those pools. Young women come here for their sunrise ceremony, crossing from childhood to adulthood as the light touches the water. And Hale would turn it into a commodity, Eliza said, anger sharpening her voice. Charge by the barrel. Control who lives and who dies of thirst. Yes, as men like him have always done. He pointed to fresh scars on the landscape survey marks, the beginning of what might become a dam. They see only profit where we see the sacred. They descended carefully, alert for patrols, but the hired guards were lazy in the pre-dawn hours, confident in their employer's power. Eliza and Tate reached the water's edge as true dawn broke, painting the canyon walls in shades of rose and gold. "This is what you're truly fighting for," Tate said, kneeling to cup water in his hands. "Not just my people's rights, but the land's right to exist without being carved up and sold." Eliza knelt beside him, tasting the sweet water, feeling its coolness against her weather-roughened skin. The woman who'd worried about proper table settings seemed like a stranger now, a ghost from another life. "I understand," she said, "and I'll make them understand. Or die trying." His voice carried an edge. "Martyrs make poor allies. Eliza." "I don't intend to be a martyr." She met his gaze steadily. "I intend to be a survivor, like you taught me." Something shifted in his expression. The careful distance he'd maintained since that night under the stars crumbled. His wet hand rose to her cheek, leaving droplets that caught the light like tears. "When you first looked at me through those jail bars," he said, "I saw a caged bird who didn't yet know she could fly. Now I see a hawk, and hawks are dangerous creatures. They see far and strike without warning." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "But even hawks can be brought down by those who fear their freedom." The morning light wrapped around them, creating a moment outside time. Here, in this sacred place, the boundaries that separated them seemed as insubstantial as mist. Apache and white, man and woman, warrior and shopkeeper, all just labels that meant nothing compared to the understanding in their eyes. "There's something I need to tell you," Tate said, his voice low and urgent. "About the name they gave me, Apache Alpha." Eliza waited, sensing the importance of this moment. "They mean it to diminish us, to make us seem like animals following base instincts. But they don't understand in our way. The Alpha isn't the strongest or the cruelest. It's the one who sacrifices most for the pack's survival, the one who stands between danger and those who cannot defend themselves." He smiled bitterly. "So, perhaps their insult is more truth than they know." "It's not who you are," Eliza said firmly. "It's just another cage made of words." "Is it?" He moved closer, and she could feel the warmth radiating from him in the cool morning air. "Because I find myself caught between two truths. The man who must lead carefully, think of consequences, measure every action, and the man who wants—" "What does he want?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Instead of answering directly, he spoke words that would echo in her memory. "Fear me, and dawn will save you. Desire me, and you'll be captive." The words hung between them like a challenge and a warning combined. Eliza understood he was offering her one last chance to step back, to choose the safer path. "And if I'm already captive?" she asked. "Not to you, but to this." She gestured at the water, the land, the cause that had brought them together. "What then?" "Then you understand that some chains we choose." His forehead touched hers, a connection point that sent warmth flooding through her. "And some prisons are more freedom than any palace." She closed the distance between them, her lips finding his with a certainty that surprised them both. He tasted of spring water and desert mornings, of strength tempered by tenderness. His arms came around her, pulling her against him as if he could shield her from all the dangers waiting beyond this moment. When they broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, the sun had fully risen. The water of Canada del Alba reflected the sky like a mirror, doubling the world. "This changes things," Tate said unnecessarily. "Everything's been changing since the day I saw you," Eliza replied. "This just makes it honest." They stayed by the water as the morning warmed, talking in low voices about plans and possibilities. Not the grand romantic declarations of dime novels, but the practical considerations of two people preparing for war, which routes she should take to avoid Hale's trackers, which officials might listen, how to protect the camp if things went wrong. But between the words ran a deeper current, touches that lingered, glances that said more than speech, a connection that transcended the physical. When Tate showed her the hidden spring that fed the main pool, his hand never left hers. When she pointed out survey markers that needed to be documented, he stood close enough that she could feel his heartbeat. "We should go," he said finally, though neither moved. "The patrols will be active soon." "I know." She turned in his arms to look once more at the water. "When this is over, when Hale is stopped and the water rights are secured, what then? Then we learn what peace looks like," he said, "if we remember how." The journey back was tense. Twice avoiding Hale's riders by taking shelter in washes Tate knew like his own scars. But they reached the hidden camp as the afternoon heat peaked, slipping back separately to avoid questions. That evening, as Eliza made her final preparations, Nietzsche approached. "You leave at dawn." The old woman said, "It wasn't a question." "Yes, and you take more than you brought." Nietzsche's knowing eyes flicked to where Tate stood talking with the warriors. "Be careful, child. Hearts given in desperate times don't always survive the peace. And hearts kept caged don't survive at all," Eliza replied. Nietzsche smiled, the expression transforming her weathered face. "Perhaps you have learned something here after all." The night passed too quickly. Eliza lay wakeful, memorizing the sounds of the camp children laughing, dogs barking, the rhythm of daily life continuing despite the shadows gathering. When the first pale light touched the sky, she was ready. Tate waited with her saddled horse, Samuel Crowfeather beside him. The young man pressed a beaded pouch into her hands. "For protection," he said shyly. "My sister made it." "Tell her I'll treasure it," Eliza said, touched by the gesture. Others gathered to see her off Cornflower, the medicine woman, warriors who'd initially viewed her with suspicion. Somewhere in the past months, she'd crossed from outsider to ally, from burden to bridge. Tate helped her mount, his hands lingering on hers as she gathered the reins. "Remember what I taught you," he said for the others' benefit. Then, lower, "Remember everything." "I will," she promised, the words carrying layers of meaning. She rode from camp without looking back, knowing that if she did, her resolve might crumble. The rising sun painted her shadow long across the desert floor, reaching back toward what she left behind while she faced what lay ahead. In her saddlebags, evidence of corruption waited like ammunition. At her throat, turquoise spoke of obligations accepted. In her heart, the memory of dawn at Canada del Alba burned like a promise. The shopkeeper's daughter was gone, transformed by desert winds and hard choices. In her place rode something more dangerous, a woman who understood both worlds but belonged fully to neither, carrying truth like a weapon and love like a secret flame. Behind her, the camp disappeared into the landscape. Ahead, the fight for justice waited. Between them, dawn kept its promises and its warning, light and shadow intertwined like lovers' hands at the edge of sacred water. The dust cloud rising from Canada del Alba was visible from 2 miles away. Eliza pressed herself flat against the red sandstone, her field glasses trained on the activity below. Beside her, Tate remained motionless, reading the scene with practiced eyes. 40 men, he said quietly. Maybe more. Hale brought a small army. 3 days had passed since Eliza's attempt to reach the federal marshal in Prescott had failed. The man had been called away on urgent business, just hours before her arrival. The pattern was clear. Hale's influence spread wider than they'd imagined. Now, with legal channels blocked, they'd returned to find Hale making his move. "They're building fortifications," Eliza observed, watching men stack stones and dig trenches. "He means to hold the water by force." "Let him try." Samuel Crowfeather's young voice carried heat. He joined them with 5 other warriors, the camp's compromise between action and caution. "We know every approach, every hiding place." "Against 40 guns," Tate cut him off. "With women and children in camp only a day's ride away. Think Samuel." Through the field glasses, Eliza spotted something that made her stomach drop. "Oh no, look at the wagons!" Tate took the glasses, going rigid at what he saw. Mining equipment, dynamite, tools for reshaping the landscape to Hale's will. "He doesn't just want to control the water," Eliza breathed. "He wants to destroy what makes it sacred. Damn it, channel it, turn it into property." A rider approached from the east, and Eliza recognized Deputy Morrison's distinctive slouch in the saddle. He'd survived his wounds from warning her, but barely. What was he doing here? The deputy dismounted near Hale's command tent. Even at distance, Eliza could see him arguing with the banker. Gesturing forcefully, Hale's response was to backhand the younger man, sending him sprawling. "Morrison's trying to stop this," she realized. "Or at least slow it down." One man with a conscience against 40 with greed. Tate said grimly, "The outcome is predictable." They watched Hale's men drag Morrison to a wagon and tie him there, not arrested, just removed as an inconvenience. The work continued, men scarring the earth with picks and shovels, preparing to remake the sacred into the profitable. "We need the others," Samuel urged. "Bring the full strength of all the bands, and give them excuse for the massacre they want." Tate shook his head. "No, we need to be smarter." "The evidence," Eliza said suddenly. "I still have it. If we can't reach federal authorities, maybe we can reach someone else. The newspapers in San Francisco, the reform movements in the East." "Too slow. By the time anyone listens, the damage will be done." Tate studied the scene below, his tactical mind working. "But you're right about being smarter. Eliza, how well do you know those men down there?" She looked again, recognizing faces from Sierra Verde. "Half of them are from town. The others must be hired guns from Tucson or further." "And the townsmen, are they killers?" "No," she considered. "Shopkeepers, miners, men who need Hale's money, but Sheriff Boyd was respected. If they knew Hale killed him, then we split them." Tate decided, make them choose between money and murder. The plan formed quickly, dangerous, dependent on timing and nerve, but better than a frontal assault. As the sun peaked overhead, they put it in motion. Eliza rode down alone, pushing her tired horse into a stumbling run that looked like desperation rather than strategy. She let herself be seen from a distance, giving the sentries time to recognize her and raise alarm. "It's the Hart woman," someone shouted. "The one Mr. Hale wants." She led them a chase through the rocks, staying just ahead, drawing them away from their posts, when she finally let herself be cornered in a box canyon. 15 men surrounded her, guns drawn but uncertain. "Miss Eliza." That was Tom Brennan, who bought coffee at her store every week. "What are you doing here?" "Running from the same man you're working for," she gasped, playing up exhaustion. "Please, Tom, I know what Franklin's told you, but it's lies, all of it." "Mister, Hale says you stole from him," another man said uncertainly. "Says you're consorting with savages." "I took evidence of murder," Eliza shot back. "Sheriff Boyd wasn't killed by Apache. Franklin shot him to silence his investigation. I have Boyd's own letters proving it." The men exchanged glances. She saw doubt creeping in, the first cracks in Hale's story. "That's quite a tale, Miss Hart." Franklin Hale himself emerged from behind the men, immaculate despite the dust. "But I'm afraid these men know better than to believe a woman who's clearly lost her mind in the desert." "Lost my mind or found my conscience." Eliza reached slowly for her saddlebag. "Sheriff Boyd wrote to me before he died. Would you like to hear what he said about you? Franklin." "I'd like you to step down from that horse." His civilized veneer cracked slightly. "We have much to discuss about your recent adventures." The crack of a rifle shot split the air. Men dove for cover as Apache warriors appeared on the canyon walls above, not attacking, just showing presence. The townsmen looked nervous, but the hired guns stayed steady, weapons tracking the new threat. "Seems the lady has friends." Tate's voice carried clearly from above. "Harm her, and discover how many—" "The famous Apache Alpha." Hale sneered. "How convenient, gentlemen. It appears we have the chance to solve multiple problems at once. But Tom Brennan stepped between Eliza and Hale, confusion on his weathered face. Mr. Hale, if what she says about Boyd is the desperate lie of a woman who's thrown away everything decent for savage company. Hale finished. Look at her. Brennan, dressed like them, riding with them. Is this whose word you'd take? Eliza pulled Boyd's letter from her saddlebag, holding it high. His own words. Tom, in his own hand, he knew Franklin was planning something at Canada del Alba. He died trying to stop it. Give me that, Hale commanded. But Brennan was closer. The shopkeeper took the letter, reading quickly. His face paled. This says you threatened him, says you bragged about having judges in your pocket. Forged, obviously, Hale said, but sweat beaded on his forehead. I know Boyd's writing, Brennan said slowly. Seen it on enough warrants? He looked at the other townsmen. Boys, I think we've been had. The scene balanced on a knife's edge. Hired guns stayed loyal to their pay, but the townsmen wavered, torn between truth and consequences. Then young Morrison's voice rang out from where he was tied. She's telling the truth. I saw Hale shoot Boyd. Why do you think he's got me trussed up like a turkey? That tipped it. Brennan and several others lowered their weapons, stepping away from Hale's group. The banker's face flushed red. You fools! You take the word of a woman who's been, he gestured crudely, consorting with these animals. Seems to me, Brennan said quietly, the only animal here is the one who'd murder a lawman and poison water for profit. Hale pulled his pistol, aiming at Eliza. Then you can all hang together for... The shot came from above, not killing, but sending Hale's gun spinning from his hand. He clutched his bloodied fingers, cursing. The next one won't miss, Tate warned. What followed was chaos carefully controlled. The Apache warriors used the canyon's acoustics, making their numbers seem greater. Rocks fell in strategic places, cutting off retreat routes. The townsmen openly rebelled now, some restraining hired guns who wanted to fight. Eliza watched Hale's miniature empire crumble in minutes, without the cover of law. Without the townsmen's compliance, his hired guns were just thugs outnumbered in hostile terrain. You can't stop progress, Hale snarled, cradling his wounded hand. The territory needs water management, needs civilization. Needs honest men, not thieves and murderers. Brennan interrupted. He'd taken charge of the townsmen, his grocery store authority suddenly carrying weight. Miss Eliza, we'll see Morrison freed and Mr. Hale secured for proper trial. A trial where... Hale laughed bitterly. I own half the judges. Then we'll find the other half, Morrison said, rubbing his freed wrists. Or take it federal. Murder of a sheriff's a federal crime. The hired guns, seeing the tide turned and their employer captured, began negotiating their own retreat. They had no stake beyond pay, and a defeated employer paid nothing. As the sun slanted toward evening, the scene at Canada del Alba transformed. Where morning had brought occupation, sunset saw liberation. The Apache warriors descended cautiously, Tate among them, keeping weapons ready but not threatening. This isn't over, Hale promised as Brennan's men tied his hands. You think you've won, I have partners. Influence. You have a date with a judge. Eliza cut him off. And this time, we'll make sure it's one you haven't bought. She dismounted, exhaustion hitting as adrenaline faded. Tate appeared beside her, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. That was dangerous, he said quietly. Everything's dangerous now. She looked at the sacred pools. Still intact, still flowing. But some things are worth the risk. Morrison approached, still moving stiffly from his wounds. Miss Hart, I owe you an apology, and a debt. You saved my life twice over warning me about Hale and now this. Pay it forward, she told him. There'll be other Franklin Hales, other schemes to steal what can't be owned. Maybe next time, the law will be ready. As they organized the retreat to Sierra Verde, Hale and his unrepentant supporters under guard. Evidence carefully preserved, Eliza found herself standing with Tate at the water's edge. "It's not finished," he said. "This was one battle in a longer war." "I know." She touched the turquoise at her throat. "But it's a start. The townspeople saw truth defeat lies. Saw Apache and whites work together. That's something." "Something," he agreed. His hand found hers, intertwining fingers scarred by shared struggles. "The camp will want to celebrate. Will you come?" "Try to stop me?" She smiled, feeling lighter than she had in days. "Though first, I need to see Franklin properly jailed, and document everything while memories are fresh, and figure out what happens to the store now that Caldwell's likely to prison too." "Still thinking like a shopkeeper?" Tate teased gently. "Thinking like a warrior who knows the battle's not won until the paperwork's filed," she corrected. They stood together as shadows lengthened, watching the sacred water reflect the changing sky. Around them, men who'd come as enemies departed as uneasy allies, bound by witnessed truth and shared victory. It wasn't the ending, Eliza knew that. There would be trials and testimonies, threats and attempts to discredit her. The store would need managing, the town would need healing, the fragile alliance would need nurturing. But for now, Canada del Alba ran free, and justice had won a round against greed. And two people from different worlds stood hand in hand at the edge of sacred water, proof that some boundaries existed only in minds too small to see beyond them. The first stars appeared in the deepening sky, and somewhere a coyote called not hunting but celebrating, its voice echoing off canyon walls that had witnessed love and war and the stubborn human insistence that right could defeat might. If enough people stood together, tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tonight brought the promise that they wouldn't face them alone. The courthouse in Tucson stood like a monument to order in a disorderly world. Eliza adjusted her collar proper Eastern fashion restored for the occasion and tried not to think about how the corset felt like armor after months of freedom. Beside her, Deputy Morrison fidgeted with his new sheriff's star, Boyd's old badge polished to shine. "Jury's back," he murmured. "Whatever happens now." "We told the truth," Eliza finished. "That has to count for something." 3 months had passed since Canada del Alba. 3 months of depositions and threats, of newspapers painting her as everything from a heroine to a traitor. The trial had become a sensation, the banker who'd tried to steal water rights, the woman who'd lived with Apache to expose him, the question of where progress ended and greed began. The courtroom filled quickly. Eliza spotted familiar faces, Tom Brennan and other townsmen who'd turned against Hale, reporters from as far as San Francisco. And in the back, trying to blend with shadows, 2 Apache men in town clothes. Not Tate, he couldn't risk appearing, but she recognized them from camp and felt less alone. Judge Thornton, brought in from Colorado to ensure impartiality, called for order. The jury filed in. 12 men who held Franklin Hale's fate and, indirectly, the future of water rights in the territory. Has the jury reached a verdict? "We have, Your Honor." Eliza held her breath as the foreman read guilty of conspiracy to defraud, guilty of attempted murder of Sheriff Boyd, guilty of false imprisonment. The list went on. Each verdict another bar in the cage Hale had built for himself. The banker sat rigid as his world collapsed, his expensive lawyers already planning appeals that would likely fail. When the judge pronounced sentence 20 years hard labor, Hale finally looked at Eliza. The hatred in his eyes should have frightened her. Instead, she felt only pity. He'd had everything and thrown it away for the promise of more. Outside the courthouse, chaos waited. Reporters shouted questions while photographers' flashes exploded like small suns. Morrison formed a protective barrier, guiding her through the crowd. "Miss Hart, is it true you're planning to marry an Apache chief? Miss Hart, what about your store? Will you return to Sierra Verde? Miss Hart, do you consider yourself a traitor to your race?" She ignored them all until one voice cut through familiar and unwelcome. Caldwell stood by a hired carriage, somehow having avoided prosecution by turning state's evidence against Hale. "Eliza," he called, his thin face attempting fatherly concern. "Let me take you home. The store needs you. The town needs stability." "The store is no longer your concern," she said coolly. "My lawyer has already filed papers dissolving your guardianship and recovering the funds you embezzled." His mask slipped. "You ungrateful after everything I did? You did nothing but try to sell me like cattle." She turned away, but his hand caught her arm. "You think you've won. You think those savages will accept you. You're nothing to them but a useful tool. And when that usefulness ends—" Morrison's hand fell heavy on Caldwell's shoulder. "Sir, I suggest you release Miss Hart before I arrest you for assault." Caldwell let go, but his parting words followed her. "You'll die alone in the desert, forgotten by both worlds. Mark my words." That evening, Eliza sat in her hotel room, victory tasting like ash. The trial was won, but Caldwell's words gnawed at her. Was he right? Had she destroyed her old life only to find herself barred from the new one? A knock interrupted her brooding. Morrison stood in the hallway, looking uncomfortable. "Sheriff," she greeted him. "About that." He shifted his weight. "I'm resigning, recommending Tom Brennan for the position. He's got the respect, and after standing up to Hale—" "Why resign? You're a good lawman." "Maybe, but I'm done with territories." He pulled out an envelope. "Going back east. Thought you should see this first, though. Letter from the Interior Department." Eliza's hands shook as she read. In dry bureaucratic language, it established a protected status for Canada del Alba and surrounding water sources. Not a reservation, those came with too many broken promises, but a recognition of existing claims, backed by federal authority. "How?" she breathed. "Seems your trial made waves in Washington. Some reform-minded folks used it to push through protections they'd been wanting." Morrison smiled. Funny how one person standing up can change things. After he left, Eliza stood at her window, watching Tucson's gaslights flicker. One battle won, one protection gained, but Caldwell's prediction haunted her. Where did she belong now? The answer came with dawn. She dressed in her riding clothes, a compromise between Apache practicality and town respectability, and prepared to leave. The hotel clerk tisked disapprovingly but said nothing. Her reputation was already ruined by conventional standards. She might as well be comfortable. The journey to the camp took 2 days. She could have made it faster, but stopped at Sierra Verde to check on the store. Brennan was running it in her absence, keeping meticulous records. "Folks are split," he admitted. "Some say you're a hero, others—" He shrugged. "But your credit's good with me, Miss Hart. Always will be." She settled what business she could, arranged for Brennan to continue managing with a proper salary, and rode on. The familiar desert embraced her heat and dust and the endless sky that made human conflicts seem small. But as she neared the hidden camp, uncertainty crept in. 3 months was a long time. Had her place there been real or just necessity? Was she returning home or chasing an illusion? The answer came in the form of children racing to meet her, calling her name in Apache and English. Cornflower emerging from her shelter with a smile of genuine welcome. Samuel Crowfeather taking her horse, chattering about hunts and raids avoided and news from other bands. And Tate, standing at the edge of camp, watching her arrival with eyes that showed relief and something deeper. "You came back," he said simply when she reached him. "Where else would I go?" She touched the turquoise still at her throat. "This is home now. If you'll have me—" "The question," Nietzsche interrupted, approaching with her measured stride, "is what you bring, not goods or gold, but purpose. The fight for water is won for now. What next?" Eliza considered. "Education. Teaching the children English and writing so they can fight with words when the time comes. Learning more of your medicine to blend with what I know. Building bridges between towns and bands. So next time conflict threatens, There are voices for peace. Ambitious, the elder noted. And dangerous. Many on both sides prefer walls to bridges. Then we build carefully, one stone at a time. Eliza met her gaze. I'm not Apache. I'll never be Apache. But I can be a friend, an ally, a voice that speaks in both worlds. Nietzsche studied her for a long moment, then smiled. You have learned. Very well. But first, you eat. You look like a town ghost, all pale and thin. As the elder walked away, Tate took Eliza's hand. She's right. You look tired. 3 months of sleeping in beds and eating proper meals, Eliza said wryly. It's exhausting being civilized. They walked to the spring, the same place where so much had begun. The afternoon light painted the water gold, and for a moment, neither spoke. I watched from the ridge during the trial, Tate admitted. Couldn't enter the town, but I could see the courthouse every day, wondering if you'd return or if that world would reclaim you. It tried, she said honestly. Offers of marriage from respectable men who thought I needed saving. Propositions to write my story for Eastern audiences. Even a teaching position at a missionary school, if I'd renounce my savage associations. Tempting offers, safety, respectability, a defined place. A cage is a cage, whether made of gold or iron. She turned to face him. I meant what I said. This is home. You are... She paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound like a dime novel. You're where I choose to be. His kiss was answer enough. Months of separation dissolved in a moment of certainty. When they parted, both breathing unsteadily, he rested his forehead against hers. The railroad comes, he said quietly. Despite Hale's failure, it comes. The world changes and we must change or be crushed. Then we adapt. We learn their laws to protect our ways. We build alliances with reformers and journalists. We document everything, every treaty, every promise, every tradition. She smiled. We become too valuable to eliminate and too visible to ignore. Spoken like a warrior shopkeeper. He teased, but his eyes were serious. It won't be easy. My people have centuries of betrayal to overcome. Yours have centuries of prejudice. Then we have work to do. She kissed him again, brief but promising. Starting with those children who need to learn letters and those healing songs you promised to teach me. That evening, the camp celebrated her return with quiet joy. No grand feast resources were too precious, but shared food and shared stories. Eliza found herself translating between languages, bridging gaps with words when understanding faltered. Later, as stars emerged like scattered diamonds, she sat with Tate watching the camp settle for sleep. Tomorrow would bring challenges teaching resistant children, earning trust again and again, navigating the narrow path between two worlds that barely tolerated each other. But tonight, she was simply home. The rails might be coming, bringing change like an iron river. But here in the heart of the desert, some things endured. Love, community, the choice to build rather than destroy. No regrets, Tate asked, reading her thoughtful silence. None, Eliza said firmly. For the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I choose to be. The coyotes sang their ancient songs to the stars, and the spring whispered its eternal story. And two people from different worlds sat together in the darkness, proof that some boundaries existed only in the minds of those too frightened to cross them. Change would come, it always did, but they would meet it together, with bridges built of trust and understanding, with children who spoke both languages and carried both traditions, with a stubborn hope that two peoples could share one land if they remembered their common humanity. The rails in the heart, Eliza thought, didn't have to divide. They could also connect, carrying not just progress but possibility, not just conflict but cooperation. Time would tell which vision won. But tonight, under stars that blessed both Apache and settler alike, hope seemed not just possible, but inevitable. The morning of the ceremony dawned clear and cold, painting Canada del Alba in shades of silver and blue. Eliza stood at the water's edge, her breath misting in the desert air, watching the sun climb over the canyon walls. She wore a dress that was neither fully Apache nor fully Eastern, a creation of her own design that spoke of bridges built between worlds. Second thoughts. Naichi's voice came from behind her, amused and knowing. Third and fourth, Eliza admitted, turning to face the elder. But they all lead here. As they should. Naichi studied her with those ancient eyes that had seen so much change. You understand what you do today. This is not the white man's marriage, with papers and ownership. This is choosing to be bound, to carry another's sorrows as your own, to walk paths that may lead to joy or grief with equal steps. I understand. Eliza touched the turquoise at her throat, worn smooth by her fingers over the months. I've been choosing this since the day I first brought bread to a jail cell. The camp had gathered by the sacred pools, a small ceremony by Apache standards, but weighted with meaning. No grand celebrations, times were too uncertain for that. But the important witnesses were there, those who'd watched her transformation from frightened town woman to bridge between worlds. Tate waited by the largest spring, Samuel Crowfeather at his side. The young man had grown in the years since their desperate flight, now a leader among the younger warriors. He grinned at Eliza's approach, the expression making him look his age despite the responsibilities he carried. Sister, he greeted her in Apache, the word carrying layers of acceptance and belonging. Ready to bind yourself to our stubborn war chief? As ready as anyone can be to choose their fate, she replied in the same language, her accent much improved, though still marked by her origins. Tate turned at her voice, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. They'd been working side by side for over a year now, teaching children, negotiating with territorial officials, building the fragile alliances that kept the peace. But sometimes, in moments like this, the connection between them still felt new, still carried that electric charge of recognition from their first meeting. The ceremony itself was simple. No priest, no government official, just Naichi speaking words old as the stones, blessing their union with smoke from sage and cedar. They exchanged not rings but promises, his to honor her courage in choosing a difficult path, hers to stand with his people even when her own turned away. In the white world, they would ask, who gives this woman? Naichi said, switching to English for Eliza's benefit. But we know no one can give what owns itself. You come freely. Freely and with full knowledge. Eliza confirmed. And you, the elder turned to Tate, you accept not just this woman, but all she brings, the watching eyes of two peoples, the weight of being neither fully one thing nor another. I accept all of her, as she accepts all of me, he replied, his hand finding hers. They spoke their own words then, standing knee-deep in the sacred water, letting the spring that had brought them together witness their joining. Eliza thought of that dawn months ago when he'd warned her about the chains of desire, and smiled. You told me once that desiring you would make me captive, she said, water swirling around their joined hands. You were right, but you didn't mention that you'd be equally bound. The wisest traps catch the hunter as well as the prey, he admitted, pulling her closer. I chose these chains the day you looked at me and saw a man, not a symbol. Their kiss tasted of spring water and promises, witnessed by their blended community, Apache who'd learned to trust a white woman. Townspeople who'd learned Apache weren't the savages propaganda painted them as. As they emerged from the water, cornflower wrapped them in a blanket woven with symbols of protection and fertility. For the cold, she said with a wink, and for the future. The celebration that followed was modest but joyful. Venison roasted over open fires. Children playing games that mixed Apache tradition with frontier innovation. Stories told in two languages with laughter needing no translation. As evening approached, a rider appeared on the ridge, Tom Brennan, still wearing his sheriff's star and looking uncomfortable but determined. Miss Hart, Mrs. He stopped, unsure how to address her now. Eliza is fine, Tom, she assured him. What brings you here? News from Tucson. And Washington? He dismounted, accepting water from Samuel with a grateful nod. The railroad's coming through, but they've agreed to respect the protected zones. And there's more. The Interior Department wants to hire cultural liaisons, people who can work with both sides to prevent conflicts. And, Eliza prompted, recognizing the careful way he was building to something. And they want you, both of you, actually. He looked at Tate. Official positions, salary, authority to negotiate on behalf of the Apache bands. It's not perfect, but it's recognition that things need to change. The offer hung in the air like morning mist, beautiful but potentially ephemeral. Eliza felt the camp's attention focus on them, waiting to see how their leaders would respond. We need to discuss this, Tate said carefully. Such positions could protect our people, or they could make us tools of those who would destroy us. True enough. Brennan agreed. I'll be in Sierra Verde for a week. Send word when you decide. He paused, then added, for what it's worth. I think you do good, both of you. Maybe help us avoid the bloodshed other territories have seen. After he left, the celebration continued, but Eliza noticed the thoughtful looks, the quiet discussions. Change was coming whether they accepted positions or not. The question was how to meet it. That night, in their shelter now truly theirs, Eliza lay beside Tate, tracing the scars on his hands from their wild flight years ago. What do you think? She asked quietly. I think the world changes whether we wish it or not, he replied. We can try to stop it and be crushed, or we can try to guide it and maybe save something precious. The children need to learn both ways. Eliza mused. To be Apache in their hearts but speak the language of law and politics. It's not fair to them, forcing them to carry two worlds. Fair left this land long ago, he said. Now we deal with what is... He was quiet for a moment, then continued. If we take these positions, we paint targets on ourselves. Every failure will be our fault. Every conflict will test us. And if we don't, then others make decisions for us, about us, without us. Eliza rose on one elbow, studying his face in the moonlight, filtering through the shelter opening. We've come this far by choosing the harder path. Why stop now? He smiled, the expression transforming his often serious features. My practical warrior. Very well. We'll send word tomorrow we accept, but with conditions. Authority must be real, not ceremonial. Protection for the sacred sites must be written in ironclad law, and we work together. Always. Together, she agreed, sealing it with a kiss that led to other affirmations of their partnership. Wordless, but no less binding. Later, as Tate slept, Eliza stepped outside to look at the stars, the same stars that had witnessed her transformation from shopkeeper to warrior, from captive to choosing her own chains. She thought of Caldwell's prediction, dying alone, forgotten by both worlds. Instead, she'd found a place between worlds, building bridges with words and actions, creating something new from the collision of old ways and new realities. A coyote called in the distance, answered by another, then another. A conversation across the darkness, like the work she and Tate would do, carrying messages between peoples who'd forgotten how to hear each other. Freedom isn't the absence of bonds, she whispered to the stars, remembering her own words from that first desperate flight. It's choosing which bonds have meaning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The railroad would come, bringing prosperity and destruction in equal measure. There would be those on both sides who'd call them traitors, who'd work to undermine every bridge they built. But tonight, she stood under stars that blessed Apache and settler alike, wearing the chains she'd chosen, bound by love and purpose to a cause that might actually make a difference. Not the romantic ending of a dime novel, but something better, a beginning built on truth and choice, and the stubborn belief that understanding could triumph over hatred. The spring gurgled its eternal song, and somewhere in the camp, a child laughed in their sleep, dreaming in 2 languages. These were the sounds of hope, Eliza thought. Not grand pronouncements or treaty signings, but water flowing and children growing and people choosing connection over division. She returned to the shelter, to warmth and belonging, to the man who'd shown her that some prisons were freedom and some freedom was just another kind of cage. Together, they'd walk the narrow path between worlds, building a future one careful step at a time. The dawn would bring what it would bring, but for now, in the heart of the desert night, 2 people who'd chosen each other over easier paths slept entwined, proof that love could bloom even in the harshest ground, that bridges could span the widest canyons, that some chains were worth forging in the fire of difficult choices. And in the spring of Canada, Del Alba, water flowed eternal and free, carrying their promises downstream to whatever future waited, blessing all who drank with the courage to choose their own chains and wear them with pride. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where in the world you're experiencing this tale. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss your thoughts. If you enjoyed this journey through the Old West, please subscribe to Wild West Tales, like this video, and hit the hype button to help more people discover these stories of love, courage, and bridging divided worlds. Your support means everything.